Hello and welcome back to Make a Mixtape. I am Zach Little and I'm recording this intro with what's called automatic double tracking. That's a recording technique where you record two layers of lead vocals, essentially identical takes. Sometimes you put one sort of in the left channel and the other sort of in the right channel. Just a little though. Like you don't fully pan all the way to the right and the left because that sounds weird. This technique has been around since Buddy Holly, but I feel like it's associated most often these days with guys like Elliott Smith, Conor Oberst, Phoebe Bridgers. It's a technique that somehow tends to both smooth over and also emphasize the flaws in your voice, the warbles and the fry. For a lot of indie artists who use it often, it can feel like the default expression of their voices, and so when they go back to a single track on certain songs, it gives it a more plaintive or stripped down vibe. It definitely helps to have a unique voice and a unique way of performing vocally where you kind of know instinctively how each phrase sounds coming out of your mouth, where you can like imagine your own voice pretty vividly. Because you have to get the timing right. If you don't, it sounds really weird.
Hey Zach, how you doing?
All right, man. How are you doing today?
Good, thanks for having me. Do you go by Zach or Zachary?
I guess Zach. I don't know.
Okay.
Never had like strong feelings either way.
Okay, cool. Good to know.
What we do here, is we're going to kind of just go through these songs on your playlist and we'll use that as a way to kind of like get to know you. But like kind of what's the elevator pitch for people that are listening to this? What should they know about you?
So my name is Kevin Frolix, but I perform and record music under the name Goodbye Charlemagne, which is my band name, but it's all just one-man band. I was a comedian for 10 years here in New York where I live. So from pretty much from 2010 to 2020, I was out there grinding, hitting open mics, doing shows, doing stand-up comedy, and writing sketches with the Upright Citizen Brigade Theater. And then the pandemic hit and all of that kind of went away. And so I kind of pivoted to music. So as a kid, I played, woodwind instruments in school bands and, learned guitar because everybody learns guitar in middle school and high school. And always played just on my own and kind of went back to it as a creative outlet when everything else was shut down and kind of haven't left. So I've just been learning how to record from home. And so I've released a bunch of albums. This year, I actually challenged myself to record 4 albums in a single year, which was a lot. So recorded 40 songs in 1 year and put out an album every 3 months. All 4 albums are very different genres. So I did a whole decades project where I went 60s garage rock, 70s disco, 80s synth pop, and then the most recent one was 90s alt rock. And it was a fun challenge, and also a lot of work went into it, but yeah, really, really cool. So yeah, I'm proud of all 4 of them and encourage people to check it out.
And I really enjoy your music. I love that I love about it is that it's funny, but it's not like funny song funny.
Thank you. Yeah, that was important to me.
If someone didn't speak English, like they could listen to your records and they'd be like, cool, I like these songs. And just would not know that there's kind of some funny stuff to it.
Yeah. I always loved artists like that too, like Sparks or Warren Zevon, great musicians, but also had some really funny lyrics. So I think that comes in some of the songs I picked as well.
It definitely does. And in fact, that's your first pick for a song that reminds you of your childhood. We've got Istanbul by They Might Be Giants.
So take me back to Constantinople. No, you can't go back to Constantinople. Been a long time gone. Constantinople, why did Constantinople get the works? That's nobody's business but the Turks.
Yeah, They Might Be Giants. One of those one of those bands that I got really, really into probably I don't know, when I was 10 or 11. And I've kind of grown to appreciate more and more. They have such a dense catalog or such a, I don't know, such a large catalog that there's always something new to kind of find with them. And they're still putting out great music now. I chose Istanbul, which technically is a cover. I think it's originally a Cole Porter standard from the 20s. But I love their version. And the first time I ever heard They Might Be Giants, and this song in particular, was on Tiny Toon Adventures, the spin-off of the Looney Tunes, where it's a bunch of kid Looney Tunes at Acme University. And they did an episode where Buster and Babs Bunny are doing an MTV parody, and they're just showing these animated music videos. And one of them is Plucky Duck in Istanbul, riding around, having adventures, trying to, get the beautiful princess to fall in love with him, and just that's like a song, and that scene in that cartoon is just something that's so embedded in my mind for like being a kid and first like hearing music that made me like excited about music.
How funny is it that, like, you know, back when you were a kid, it was like people our age who were using things like Tiny Toon Adventures to like incept their taste into kids, and it worked. And not only that, but They Might Be Giants themselves are kind of an entry path sort of band into like alternative rock and a few other genres, because there's something accessible about the humor and the language for kids. There's something else for them to attach to, which they get attached to that before they learn to attach to music. And, and I think that's how it works for a lot of kids.
A funny thing about this They Might Be Giants song is that in a sort of roundabout way, it gets at the very same point that's made by a maybe more serious song. I don't want to, every song is serious in its own way. But it's one of my favorite songs of all time, Sapelconnican by Joanna Newsom. It actually might be full stop my favorite Joanna Newsom song, which feels sort of blasphemous because she doesn't play the harp in it. She plays the piano. But I remember when this song first came out, seeing the music video by Paul Thomas Anderson, and finding out later that it was actually just something that they shot for fun on breaks while they were making another much more elaborate video project, one that I actually like a lot less. The video for Sapelconnican is just Joanna walking around and sitting around in New York, singing and tearing up, and eventually just kind of walking off out of frame. It's deceptively simple, but it's a thrilling and moving performance.
The brave men and women, so dear to God and famous to all of the ages rag.
And yeah, the song is about the same thing that Istanbul is about. It's about the weight and churn of history. Istanbul used to be called Constantinople, and the reasons why are unclear. In her song, Joanna Newsom is surveying New York City in both terms of space and time, and seeing one version of civilization building itself on top of another for centuries. Sapelconnican was the name of an indigenous trading post set up on what is now Manhattan Island in the 1600s. And the song races through various historic events that happened in the area, examining what's remembered and what's forgotten, and how unknowable most of history really is. The song both ends and begins with a reference to Ozymandias from the famous Percy Shelley poem about finding a destroyed monument in a desert wasteland, a broken statue with an inscription that says, "Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair." What works, right? That's the joke. Nobody knows. They're gone now, whatever they might have been. I don't know that Joanna Newsom is herself despairing over this fact, just observing it. There's a reference to a potter's field in this song, and that refers to how a huge section of what is now Greenwich Village was a burial ground where thousands were buried during yellow fever and cholera epidemics in the 1800s. Only to be flattened and turned into a public park in 1871. That's life, I guess. Like, even as we make a show of remembering with monuments and arches and whatever, we mostly forget.
I try to do well, but I won't be. Will you tell the one that I love to remember and hold me? I call and call for the doctor, but the slow swallows me whole, the flowery water lives on.
But that, all that indifference, all that churn, it still leaves a little space for the beauty of remembering sometimes. Seeing a faint glimmer of the past and wondering what it was all really like. And knowing that you don't know, and you won't. It's nobody's business but the Turks.
All right, well, let's talk about a song that you consider to be an all-time favorite. Let's talk about REM, the three gentlemen from Atlanta.
Yep, yeah. Losing My Religion.
Not Atlanta, Athens, Georgia, right?
Yeah, Athens, Georgia. Yeah, they all, I think they met like University of Georgia or whatever. Yeah, it's something like that. But I feel like I'm pretty sure Losing My Religion was their biggest hit in their career, and it's almost like the cliche REM song, but it's a cliche for a reason. Just it is that mandolin intro is just like so iconic, and like if I hear it, if I am listening to the radio and that song comes on, like it's getting turned up. If it comes on, on shuffle, if I'm listening to a playlist, it is just one that the lyrics, the melody, everything about it is just so iconic. And I feel like it's also this song in particular, but REM in general, I feel like is a band that I don't know anybody who hates REM. There might be people who are, meh, they're not the biggest fans, but I don't know anybody who, even people who are like, I don't like REM, they'll be like, except for that one song, and it's probably Losing My Religion. I feel like it's they're one of those, bands that brings all Americans together somehow.
I feel like I'm sort of carrying a future REM obsession kind of like in suspension over my head. Like I listen to REM, I like several of their songs but I've never gone in deep.
Yeah.
But it's like I just have that, for a future, for like a slow cultural year. It'll be I'll just be like, all right, it's time to get into REM this year. And I'll do that. They're a fun
band. They're a very fun band to just like start at the beginning and just like do a full discography listen, because they have so much and like all the albums are really good. And even albums of theirs that I'm not the biggest fan of, I'm like, well, except for that one song. That song's great. Like there's
I probably the most famous mandolin song, right?
It's up there, yeah.
Is it like When the Moon Hits Your Eye Like a Big Pizza Pie?
yeah, it's that. Maybe the intro to Maggie May by Rod Stewart.
Oh yeah, sure, yep.
Maybe, but yeah.
Those are on Mandolin Mount Rushmore. I had a mandolin for a while. I never really mastered it, but because it's got those 8 strings and it's tuned so tight. My house is not very well insulated, so I should have kept it looser, because like between the cold and the warmth, one day it was just hung on the wall in my dining room and it straight up exploded. Like
whoa!
It looked like a sculpture, like it was still hanging from the wall, but it was in like 9 pieces. So
wow.
R.I.P. my mandolin.
Turn your click up, dog. Turn them up. Turn your bitch up, dog. Turn her up. Tight, these streets can't cross it. Cross them up. All these streets need bosses. Boss them up. Turn your click up, dog. Turn them up. Turn your bitch up, dog. Turn her up. Tight, these streets can't cross it. Cross them up. All these streets need bosses.
Let's talk about a song that you are listening to a lot right now, which is Fear of Living by the Lemonheads. I heard, this is the first time I heard this song this morning, driving into work.
It's relatively new. It's very new, actually. I think it only came out, a few weeks, maybe a month or so ago. So I have been listening to a lot of 90s alternative, because the most recent album I put out was a 90s alternative inspired album, and Lemonheads was one of those bands that I was always aware of, and I knew a couple songs, but I was like, oh, let me do a deep dive and hear a couple of their big hit, big albums. And so It's a Shame About Ray in particular was like the album that I was like, wow, this is amazing, and like I really love this guy's voice and just the arrangement. It's so 90s, but it's got that kind of like folk rocky REM type of sound, but that melancholic, almost like a grungy attitude to it. It's like a hybrid of like the Nirvana and REM, which like was that was my teenage angst soundtrack right there, was those two. And so I really connected to it. And then his voice is still strong, but like he's 30 years older than when It's a Shame About Ray came out, so it's like lower and a little gravelier.
I noticed that.
Yeah, and I was like, I really like this voice, and it's just so catchy, and like, it does that thing where it's like the music is very kind of upbeat, but it's also so eerie. It's like I don't know, it's just something that I heard it and I just kept craving like going back to it, and like kept finding it in my Spotify to just like listen to it.
So for our 4th song on here, a song that lifts your mood, this is Yes, song Roundabout. Yes. Is this prog rock? Is that what this is?
This is progressive rock at its finest, but also at its most like radio friendly. I am, despite my love of like just a short pop song, a short catchy They Might Be Giants song, I am a huge progressive rock nerd and have been since high school when I first heard like Jethro Tull and any band from the 70s, probably from England, usually from England, that has an album where there's one side of the album that's one song. I give that to me. I love that. Yes is one of my favorite bands of that era, and Roundabout is just, it's such a high energy song. Chris Squire's bass line is just like such a upbeat driving bass line. And for me, like there was a while where when I was doing comedy, especially if I needed like a pump up song before I got on stage, just the solos, the dueling guitar and organ solos that Steve Howe and Rick Wakeman do on this are just like, they get me into a mood. So that's like a lot of other people who put on, Wu-Tang Clan or something, and then I'd be over here listening to just two prog rock nerds dueling on the respective instruments.
It definitely sounds like math to me, but not like necessarily in a bad way.
Yeah. There's King Crimson is probably the other big prog band, and Van der Graaf Generator. There's so many where it's like, okay, we get it. You can write in 7/16 or whatever you're doing.
Yeah. It's like, I know these guys. It's an approach to music that I don't necessarily understand, but
Sure.
I respect it. You know, I respect the approach. All right. So moving from someone I'm unfamiliar with to somebody I'm very familiar with. Our fifth song here is from Tom Waits. So this is a song that makes you sad or sustains a sad feeling. Ruby's Arms by Tom Waits. Interesting. Yes. This is like I feel like this is the transitional Tom Waits album because like in the 70s,
Vine, right?
Yeah, in the 70s he was more like piano crooner, and then by 1983 that was like when Swordfish Trombones came out, and he was like, I'm a crazy demon now.
Yeah. I don't know if this is true, but I had heard a rumor that like somewhere in this era, like because I love those first two Waits albums, especially the second one, Hard as Saturday Night, like one of my favorite albums of all time. But I heard that like those weren't selling too well, and when he was in that piano crooner phase, and the rumor I heard was that he just started like screaming into a pillow as hard as he could to like tear his vocal cords. This is the rumor. This is I could verify it because we have the internet now, but I think Tom Waits has that quote of just like, I miss like wondering stuff. Now you just ask a question and they're like, let me look it up. It's like, no, I don't want to know. I just want to wonder about it. And I feel like in honor of Tom Waits, I don't want to do that.
To Ruby's Arms.
Ruby's Arms is, it's one that like, it drew me in with the piano and the melody and everything. And it was one that like, I would be listening to Heart Attack and Vine, and I kept like, I want to listen to this one again and again. And then finally, like, the lyrics kicked in, and I like really understood the story of this pathetic, sort of sad man that Tom Waits is singing about, who is in love with a woman, and like he clearly loves her very much, and then realizes like, you know what, like I'm just a piece of trash, and like I don't deserve. It's just the person who just doesn't feel that he deserves nice things and doesn't deserve this woman that he loves, and so just like sneaks out of the house while she's asleep to just be a railroad bum again. And like when I like first like really absorbed the story, I was just like weeping on the subway in New York, and I was like, oh, and just that line about like all I needed are my railroad boots, and he just like is walking in, he's just like screaming about like damn this rain and everything. It's just such a visceral picture of this person.
We love Tom Waits. I agree. I don't like to know anything about him, Yeah. I like that he has the vibe all the time of like pictures of Willem Dafoe.
Yeah. Yes. Wow. Excellent.
Speaking of my guy, Willem Dafoe. So, at the beginning of every new year, there's not really as much to see in movie theaters by February. Like, Oscars-wise, you're as caught up as you're probably going to get. I've seen 8 of the 10 Best Picture nominees, and I don't really think that Zone of Interest or Anatomy of a Fall is going to pull out an upset victory, so I'm cool with catching them later. So what I tend to do around this time is watch the movies that I know will be great that I have somehow never gotten around to, like Creed, which I just saw. Amazing, incredible movie. But I also rewatch movies that I feel like I just wasn't ready to appreciate when I first saw them. So one such movie that I just rewatched is Spike Lee's Inside Man. What a picture. I love the way that Spike Lee directs movies because there is such an urgency and musicality to the way that his camera moves and the way that he strings a sequence together. Inside Man is just thrumming with energy that you can really appreciate when you have it, and you can sometimes really feel when you don't. Like, for instance, Zack Snyder. Like, I like Zack Snyder movies, and my guy does a lot of needle drops. There's like 5 Nick Cave songs in the 4-hour cut of Justice League. So you'd think that because Snyder brings such a soundtrack to the party that he would be a director with musicality, but he's not. Inside Man moves like a song even when there's no music playing. It has a beat, it has a rhythm. Justice League and 300 and Man of Steel, they just don't have that. I don't mean to pick on Zack Snyder. I think, everybody has their own internal beat, and so maybe some people do resonate on Zack Snyder's frequency, but I was just thinking, like, what's a movie that's boring despite outwardly seeming exciting, and that's who came to mind. Anyway, a funny thing about Inside Man is that Willem Dafoe is in it, and he just plays like a guy. He's just a cop who's around for most of the movie and doesn't really do anything, and it's weird because it's like, what is Willem Dafoe doing here if he's just going to play a guy? It turns out that he ran into Spike Lee at a play shortly before production, and they were like, we should work together, and Spike was like, why don't you just come hang out on this movie that I'm doing, like, next week? It made me wonder why, like, big, established Hollywood names don't do that more often. Like, almost just as a prank, or to subvert expectations. Like, if you're watching a movie normally, and, Tim Robbins is working at the counter of a bodega, you're like, oh, okay, he's the killer, But, what if he was just playing bodega guy? I know that in theory would take away from the workaday actors who normally fill those parts. I'm not saying it should happen that often. Just sometimes, just for fun. I think that Daniel Day-Lewis should come out of retirement only to play, like, the cut man on the villains boxing team in Creed 4. He only has one line about, like, stitching up an eyebrow or something. Think about it. That would really change our expectations about movies.
All right, so let's talk about Philip Glass. So the prompt, of course, is a song that makes you feel productive, which I'm actually surprised it took this long on the podcast for Philip Glass to come up in this category.
Oh, interesting.
But talk to me about it.
Yeah. So in college, whenever I would usually, because I was procrastinating, would be doing like an all-nighter to write a paper or, do whatever homework that I had put off to the very last minute. If I needed, I'm somebody that just music in general, I need to have it on in the background to be productive. But in college and now if I'm like really kind of stressed and just need something, like the very meditative quality of Philip Glass's music is very repetitive. It's that minimalist. In the 80s, it was very synth heavy. And I would listen to Philip Glass's stuff. I got really into his opera Einstein on the Beach, which I love. And it's an opera, but all of the words to it are just counting. So it's very repetitive, but it's also very soothing, and it's easy to focus when you just kind of have this pulse in the background. Glassworks, though, is my favorite thing that Philip Glass has ever done, and Rubric is my favorite track on there. It's just got this, it just builds so nicely, and it has a lot, as a former wind instrument player, like the saxophone's doing that. Just I'm always impressed by wind instruments playing arpeggios, just because being a woodwind player for many years, I know how hard it is to like have the stamina to just play these very circular arpeggios and like the circular breathing that goes into it. So but this is one that like it's one that whenever I listen to it, it does remind me of like it's 4 a.m. and I've been up all night trying to finish a paper that I probably should have started 3 days ago, and just that cram for time. But then like finishing it, the sun is coming up, and then heading to the dining hall to drink some coffee before I go to turn it into the class.
I feel like a lot of Philip Glass's music has, despite the fact that it could be a little mathy, it can be a little like experimental, but it always has like this sort of cinematic sensibility where like, you can, it's like there's a story in his head, and I do need that. There are other instrumental or whatever composers, experimental composers, and it's where their head's at is not like, there's not a story, and that's fine because there are different types of people in the world. There are people that are very literary. There are people that are very mathematical. There are people that, So
Yeah.
it's like I need that quality. If you're gonna make that kind of music, I need that quality. And I always
sure.
I always think of the Thin Blue Line with Philip Glass because of that. I remember being 16 years old and seeing the Thin Blue Line, and there's that opening theme. And I mean, I don't know that I've ever been like more hyped for a documentary.
Yeah.
So let's talk now about a song that makes you feel creative or inspired. 6.4
Yes.
equals Make Out. First of all, bewildering title. And then the song starts, and I was like, the song actually matches the energy of this title.
Craziness. Just an insane title. But yeah, so Gary Wilson is a big inspiration for me and my music. He's one of those like DIY home recording pioneers in mid to late 70s. I want to say 76, 77, around there. He was like early 20s, maybe around 2021. And recorded this album with his band, The Blind Dates, in his father's basement in Endicott, New York, upstate, called You Think You Really Know Me. This was like the big track that, from that, as much as there can be a big track from like a very underground, one of those albums that like he sold it to his friends and then people made tapes and it kind of gained this cult following, and they were playing around, New York City, CBGBs and stuff like that, and kind of had this cult following for a while. But he recorded it all on like, 4-track reel-to-reels. And so this song is just, it's creepy, it's eerie. The whole album kind of has the vibe of like, I almost describe it as it like sounds like the inner monologue of like a peeping Tom, like that a Night Stalker type of character who's just kind of like in the shadows leering, and it's very like unsettling. But he's also like a jazz guy, and so there's these like jazzy piano chords. Like sometimes it's even like almost like early Steely Dan type of keyboard. So it's like it's got like a funk element to it. But yeah, he's like whispering, and because it's like 70s home recording technology, like it's not very slick. It's like you can tell it was like the way when he's whispering, like you hear all of the sibilance and like the like I've got a real crush on Karen. Like it's like you can hear all the plosives of like everything he's saying, and it's so eerie. But it just really inspires me because it's like, wow, what a daring album that they made just with what they had available, and that's exactly what I try to do now, and it's because of people like Gary Wilson or R. Stevie Moore, Daniel Johnston, like people who are just, I have a tape recorder or I have a reel-to-reel or I have whatever's available to me, and I either have nobody, so I'm going to overdub everything myself, or I have 3 best friends that play instruments, so we are going to write this album and somehow put it out there. And that's kind of what gave me courage and inspiration when I first started doing music. It's like, all right, well, I don't have a big recording studio and I don't have, a desk filled with equipment that I can take a picture of like everybody who has a real good home studio has, but I have a MacBook and that has GarageBand, and I can record into GarageBand. And actually the first few things I did were all on an iPad. I didn't even have an iMac yet. So really just like, what do I have? Okay, I've got cables laying around. Like, how do I record this? And early stuff I did was like very primitive. And that's another reason why I did the 4-album project this year, was to like kind of force myself to get better at the recording with what I have and everything. So yeah, just those early, like those out there kind of outsider artists like really inspire me, because they were fearless. They didn't care what it came out like, and they were just like, this is the music I want to make. I want to put it out there. There's a lot of artists like that. There's a great book called Songs in the Key of Z that is just about like Daniel Johnston and like Captain Beefheart are like the 2 biggest sections, but he kind of goes in and like does little deep dives into like a bunch of weirdos that like, there was this tape, it went around, it was like a crazy guy in a nursing home made this album. Oh, this one was made by someone who thought that she was an alien, and like just weird stuff like that. But you know what? They made it, and they were like, this is an album, I'm proud of it. And that's, I think, something that's important is for anybody, really any creative field, because you'll see the polished stuff that is popular and be like, well, I can't do that. And like, yeah, maybe not, but like you've probably got what you need. You've got access to something to make the idea that's in your head. And I think that's what I find really inspiring about Gary Wilson in particular.
It's almost like everybody has to, people who I think people who want to create things end up sort of with this idea in their head, like this mental default about like production value, you know?
Yeah.
And it's particularly bad for people who like grew up in the 90s when everything was so overproduced, you know what I mean? And like no guitar sounded like a guitar, you know, it was just like nothing sounded like anything. It was all so processed. And I mean, it was true. It started to become true about like movies too, you know, like it wasn't this like gritty 70s film look. It was like they were learning to process it to such an extent that like you could not see a scene.
Yeah, it's like Star Wars 1977 versus Star Wars Phantom Menace. Like I still remember that special edition documentary where they're building the Death Star out of like model battleship parts on plywood, and like just those practical effects. Same thing, like George Lucas just like, well, what do we have? $50,000 worth of model battleships. Okay, we're gonna make the coolest space station anyone's ever seen out of these. And
yeah, and it's almost like you have to recognize that you can make something that sounds like itself, and then you also have to recognize eventually that like other people, like just like regular people, don't necessarily see a difference. You know, like we all have our own little weird technical hang-ups as creative people that are like invisible to everyone else. And you have to learn to like get over it and and to embrace kind of what your work looks like and sounds like, and you never fully get over it. You never fully get over it. But you have to like at least start to get over the fact that like the way this looks, sounds, or feels to me is not the way that it looks and sounds and feels to everybody else. And the reason for that is because it came from me. And I had in my head this idea of what it was going to be. And maybe I even got 95% of the way there, but there's still that other 5%. And it's like, that 5% is not real. Like that's a mental block that you made up.
Yes.
And the best thing you can do as like an artist of any kind is to revisit something that you made like 6 or 7 years prior, because you won't remember what that 5% was anymore.
Yeah.
And then you look at it and you're like, it actually can be discouraging sometimes because you're like, holy shit, I was so much better back then. And it's not that. It's that that journey that you took while you were trying to make it was so traumatic to you that you needed the time to get over it, basically.
Yeah.
There's war in the streets. They have assumed control. And worst of all, the government has banned rock and roll. And now it's just you and me against this brutal regime. And I am telling you now, I will never bow down to them. And so I'll say it again, you can't stop the rock and roll.
All right, that's our show. That was one of Kevin's songs. That's Goodbye Charlemagne. I almost named this episode "It's a Charlemagne About Ray," but I thought that would be like too heavy of a lift. Anyway, here's a fun fact. I don't have any episodes waiting and recorded, like waiting to be edited. I kind of thought, all right, I need to just like get to the end of my archives here and push the reset button. So that's where we're at. The point being, will there be an episode in March? I don't know. I hope so. That's the plan, to figure out something. Figure out somebody to talk to, hopefully in person. And, I'm going with it. I'm going with the flow. This is something that, for the last couple of months, I have followed my whim about what I want to work on. If I want to work on a video project, maybe I'll do some home video editing. If I want to work on some music, maybe I'll work on some music. If I want to work on the podcast, maybe I'll work on the podcast. And it's reassuring that for everything there is still a season. At no point did I turn around and realize, oh, I haven't worked on the podcast in weeks. You know, the way that I spend my free time, obviously I'm watching like a ton of movies still, but the non-movie watching time that gets subdivided out into like social time and creative time and everything, it's like it's working. All of the pieces are fitting together in a way that is psychologically pleasing. So I'm happy to report that. And I hope that you enjoyed this episode, and, talk soon.